Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraet Nasta Praeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, Text number 21. Prahlad pacifies the Lord with prayers. Maya manak shijati karma mayam baliya. Maya mana shijati karma mayam baliya. Kalena chodita gunanumatena pumsak. Chandomayam yadaja yarpita sodasaram. Chandomayam yad ayayarpita sodasaram. Samsara chakramajako titaret vadanya. Samsara chakramajako titaret vadanya. Maya, the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Manaha, the mind. There's a note here that says, I'll just read it. It says, the mind is always planning how to remain in the material world and struggle for existence. It is the chief part of the subtle body, which consists of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's a note in the word for word. So the next word is Shrujati, creates. Karmamayam, producing hundreds and thousands of desires and acting accordingly. Baliya, extremely powerful, insurmountable. Kalena, by time. Chodita guna, whose three modes of material nature are agitated. Anumatena, permitted by the mercy of the glance, time. Pumsa, of the plenary portion. Shri Lord Vishnu, the expansion of Lord Krishna. Chandamayam, chiefly influenced by the directions in the Vedas, Yat, which, Ajaya, because of dark ignorance, Arpita, offered, Sodasha, 16, Aram, the spokes, Samsara Chakram, the wheel of repeated birth and death, in different species of life. Aja, O unborn Lord. Ka, who is there. Atitaret, able to get out. Twat anya, without taking shelter at your lotus feet. Translation. O Lord, O Supreme Eternal, by expanding your plenary portion, you have created the subtle bodies of the living entities through the agency of your external energy, which is agitated by time. Thus the mind traps the living entity in unlimited varieties of desires to be fulfilled by the Vedic directions of karma kanda, fruitive activities, and the 16 elements. Who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? Please repeat. O Lord, O Supreme Eternal, by expanding your plenary portion, you have created the subtle bodies of the living entities through the agency of your external energy, which is agitated by time. Thus the mind entraps the living entity in unlimited varieties of desires to be fulfilled by the Vedic directions of karma kanda, fruitive activity, and the 16 elements. Who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. If the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in everything, where is the question of being liberated from material encagement to spiritual blissful life? Indeed, it is a fact that Krishna is the source of everything, as we understand from Krishna himself in Bhagavad-Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. All the activities in both the spiritual and material world are certainly conducted by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of either the material or spiritual nature. As further confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita 9:10, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. Without the direction of the Supreme Lord, material nature cannot do anything. It cannot act independently. Therefore, in the beginning, the living entity wanted to enjoy the material energy, and to give the living entity all facility, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, created this material world and gave the living entity the facility to concoct different ideas and plans through the mind. These facilities offered by the Lord to the living entity constitute the 16 kinds of perverted support in terms of the knowledge-gathering senses, the working senses, the mind, and the 5 material elements. The wheel of repeated birth and death is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but to direct the bewildered living entity in progress toward liberation according to varied stages of advancement. Different directions are given in the Vedas, Chandomayam. If one wants to be elevated to the higher planetary systems, he may follow the Vedic directions. As the Lord states in Bhagavad-Gita 9:25, Yanti deva vrata devan pratrinyanti pratrivrataha, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajino pimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. The real purpose of the Vedas is to direct one back home, back to Godhead. But the living entity, not knowing the real goal of his life, wants to go sometimes here and sometimes there, and do sometimes this and sometimes that. In this way, he wanders throughout the entire universe, imprisoned in various species, and thus engaging in various activities for which he must suffer the reactions. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Pramanda Pramite Kono Bhagavana Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai, Bhakti Lata Bij. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 19:151. The fallen conditioned living entity, trapped by the external energy, loiters in the material world. But if by good fortune he meets a bona fide representative of the Lord who gives him the seed of devotional service, and if he takes advantage of such a guru, a representative of God, he receives the Bhakti Lata Bija, the seed of devotional service. If he properly cultivates Krishna consciousness, he is then gradually elevated to the spiritual world. The ultimate conclusion is that one must surrender to the principles of bhakti-yoga, for then one will gradually attain liberation. No other method of liberation from the material struggle is at all possible. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshata Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangolam Gayate Girim Yat Kripastamahang Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripashindu Vahevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I really have to begin by expressing my gratitude. I was here in Vrindavan in 1974 when this property was a series of many holes in the ground. It was a construction site, and sometimes devotees would fall into the holes also. So I really have to thank the devotees who are so beautifully maintaining and increasing the beauty of this temple. Panchagoda Prabhu, I know his wife, Gaur Purnima, is very concerned with protecting the cows and protecting the children. And even yesterday I was doing a parikrama around the temple, and I saw some wonderful talented artists painting even more wonderful paintings, murals. So it's really quite stunning for me to come here and see how this temple's being maintained with such care and attention. And thank you so much. So in these wonderful prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, Lord Brahma, Lakshmi Devi, they are afraid to approach the Lord. Lakshmi Devi has never seen such a form of the Lord, so she's afraid to come close. But only the little Prahlad Maharaj, with his heart of pure devotion, can approach the Lord, and the Lord so kindly puts his hand on the head of Prahlad Maharaj, and Prahlad Maharaj begins to speak by the blessings of the Lord so many beautiful, beautiful prayers full of what Prabhupada calls Brahma Gyan, full of realization of the spiritual world. So we should understand that this is not just another story in Srimad Bhagavatam. To use some American slang, we shouldn't think that Prahlad Maharaj is just another face in the Srimad Bhagavatam, just another pretty face, just another nice story. He is really our great Acharya, and we have so much to learn from him about pure devotion, taking shelter of the Lord in the most extreme difficulties, and also about compassion. He was not satisfied to go off by himself and meditate in bliss upon the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada is really coming in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj. So we have to take it very seriously. And when we think of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri hearing the Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit was speaking from the Bhagavatam, but the words were washed away by his tears. So they were not only speaking about the Rasa Panchadvaya, Gopi, chapters about the gopis, but they were also speaking about Prahlad Maharaj. Lord Chaitanya relished the story of Prahlad Maharaj and wanted to hear it again and again. And actually, when I first became a devotee, when I was a young devotee in Montreal in 1968, Srila Prabhupada was speaking from these very prayers. So they're very, very important. One of the pinnacles of important verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam for us to take shelter of. So in this purport, Prabhupada's explaining in a very beautiful way how the mind entraps the bewildered living entity. And he uses a very interesting phrase. What does it say? He says, these facilities, the Vedic literatures, so many facilities to enjoy this world, like this kind of a pretend world that Krishna has created for us, give facilities that are offered by the Lord to the living entity. They constitute 16 kinds of perverted support. It's very interesting. So in this verse, these karma kanya Vedic directions are sort of aligned with this samsara chakra. Jai Shishi Gornitai Krishna Balaram Shishi Radhashama Sundar Lalita Vishaka. So it's a very, very interesting thing that this karma chakra, this wheel of repeated birth and death, is actually utilizing the karma kanya portions of the Vedas to bewilder and pervert our intelligence. The spokes of this samsara chakra are the 16 branches of karma kanya, 16 elements of instructions. So we're rotating actually up and down through this karma chakra, this samsara chakra. Bhagavad-Gita, 9th chapter, talks about Tetam Bhunktva Swargad Lokam Vishanti. So going up to enjoy, and then coming down again, and then going up and going around and around and around like a wheel, right? So this illusion of following Vedic instructions for perverted desires, not really for the ultimate desire to get out of the cycle altogether, to go back to the spiritual world and associate with the Lord of our eternal existence, to associate with Krishna. That's being that intrinsic desire. Most intrinsic desire is being perverted by so many bewildering instructions. So this idea of material existence as being separate from Krishna, this is the source of our entanglement in Maya. So devotees tend to fear Maya, tend to hate Maya, but Maya is actually the grace of Krishna to help us forget when we desire to wander, when we desire to loiter in this world, when we desire to take our time sightseeing in the material realm. This sense of existence, Prabhupada says, separate from Krishna is called Maya, Maya Dyakshena. But Maya is working under Krishna's direction. And when we take shelter of Krishna, Krishna can dictate to Maya, yes, free this person. Give this person the grace of freedom from this world. Krishna can dictate. And then Maya will fold her hands to such a devotee who's taken full shelter of Krishna. Prabhupada explains in the purports, there are two verses in Bhagavad-Gita. This one Prabhupada's quoting here, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti, and the other one, Daivihe Shugunamayi, where Prabhupada really explores the concept and the idea of how Maya is controlling us. And in the purport, he says that the living entity, that our own nature is that we're actually of a higher nature. We're of divine nature also, like Krishna's superior energy. But we've become, although we are a superior power, we've become entrapped and covered by this illusion of separateness, that I am part of matter. Matter is meant for me to enjoy. But when we can take shelter, like at the end of this verse, Prahlad Maharaj is saying, who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? So sometimes devotees wonder, well, what does it mean actually, lotus feet? There's a lot of feet in this tradition. Feet, Krishna's feet, everybody has these feet. But taking shelter of a pure devotee is what it means to take shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, because Krishna's beloved devotees are always situated squarely and firmly, taking shelter at his lotus feet. So what that means is to take shelter of those who find shelter at the feet of Krishna, right? And in that way we can regain our original consciousness as divine beings of a superior energy and become no longer covered by this material identification. So when we apply Vedic teachings, we have to use a criterion of, will these teachings enhance my Krishna consciousness? We have to look to see how my Krishna consciousness is going to be increased and enhanced by following these teachings. And we want to avoid those teachings which are only about further enmeshing us and entangling us in this separatist mentality. The material world is actually created by the Lord to create a facility for enjoying our concocted ideas and plans, our sort of phantasmagoria. It's like a virtual reality where we're going to play this virtual game, and I'm going to be the Lord, and I'm going to be calling the shots, and I'm going to be pushing all the buttons, and I'm going to be saying who dies and who lives, and yeah. So this is a phantasmagoria created by the separatist mentality that we've come under this perverted influence, right? There's a story about Srila Prabhupada. He was walking, I believe it was Sydney, Australia, and he was walking with some disciples, and they were walking past a children's playground, a little playground for children. And in the distance was the city, the skyscrapers of the city. And Prabhupada stopped and he paused, and he pointed to the children's playground, and he said, "Children's playland." And then he pointed to the skyscrapers in the distance and said, "Adults' playland." So we have to understand that We want no longer to, Prabhupada says, loiter in this material world, to be curious about this material world, to be exploring, as he says in the purport, sometimes going here, sometimes going there, sometimes wanting to see this, sometimes wanting to see that. But we have to develop an ardent desire, actually, an ardent desire to go back to Godhead. Even at the end of this life, Prabhupada has made it so possible and so accessible if we develop that ardent desire for really Vasudeva Katha Ruchi, for tasting the sweetness of the Rasayana Katha, the healing pastimes of Krishna, to talk about Krishna, to fall in love with Krishna. This is the medicine for this age. Rather than being curious about the infinite varieties of the material world. We have a very nice devotee in Washington, D.C., very serious devotee. She's American, and an astrologer told her once that you had your last life in India, but because you were curious about the West, you took your birth in the West. So we have to be very, very careful because, of course, Krishna is sitting in our hearts, seeing our desires. Are you curious to see what New York looks like? Or maybe see the skyscrapers in Sydney, Australia? Or maybe Los Angeles? How about Paris? There's so many clubs in Paris. Are you curious? So we have to really give up the infinite varieties of curiosity of this material world. This just takes us up and down and around on this samsara chakra, right? And become more curious to find out, what is Krishna really doing in Vrindavan? And what are all these holy places in Vrindavan that he likes to go to? And find out the details so that when you talk to your friends, it's not just, oh, how are you? How's your mom? How's your, did you get any good prasadam today? No, but actually understand and relish the details of Krishna's lila and pastimes so that you can share it in conversation, and in this way we'll all be enriched, right? So Prabhupada quotes this verse in the purport, Brahmanda Brahmite Kana Bhagyavana Jeev, right? So we've all been wandering in this kind of the scenic route. When you're driving, you can take the expressway, or you can take the scenic route, stop and see the sights. Of course, in Vrindavan, it's a good thing. But when you're out of Vrindavan, we want more of the direct route. Prabhupada used an example. He said that there's the goldsmith method of working with gold. Gold is very soft. Goldsmith method. And then there's the blacksmith method. Whop! Where you just one stroke of that gigantic hammer and the work is done. So Prabhupada was explaining that Krishna consciousness is more like the blacksmith method, that these Vedic directives, these perverted scenic routes around the Vedic phantasmagoria are really a goldsmith method that can take many, many lives, hundreds of lives even, going up, going down, going up and going down, right? So Srila Prabhupada, in his purport at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita 12th chapter, devotional service, where Arjuna asks, which is better, the impersonal path or the ones who are engaged in your devotional service, which is better? And at the end of that chapter, where Krishna clearly uplifts the path of bhakti as the most important, the most dear to Krishna. But in the very last purport, Prabhupada explains that the impersonal conception of the Absolute can be helpful until one meets a pure devotee of the Lord. So I would extend it to also say, these Vedic karma kandya or pious work, to be very pious, to follow the Vedic rules, it can be helpful until one meets and hears the conclusions of the great pure devotee, great acharya like Srila Prabhupada, who can give us, kind of get through all the weeds of this and give us that whomp blacksmith method. Yeah. in the purport to Bhagavad-Gita 7:14, where again this Daivihi Guna Maya, the Maya is described, Prabhupada explains that when someone is bound by the hands and feet, another bound person cannot liberate such a person. It must be someone who is unbound to be able to liberate such a bound up person. So we really have to look to the great acharyas like Srila Prabhupada and take their divine and most high instructions to get free from this material world. And then Krishna can order the release. Krishna can tell Maya is the servant of Krishna. She's Vaishnavi, right? So Krishna can order her, release this one. He's very sincere, she's very sincere. Krishna can give that order. So taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord is represented again by taking shelter of his pure devotee. And how do we approach such a spiritual master? Bhagavad-Gita explains, chapter 4, verse number 34, one should approach a spiritual master, tadvidi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya. Pariprashnena, submissive inquiry, sevaya, to do service. So what does it mean? In the purport to this verse, Prabhupada explains that absurd inquiry, blind following and absurd inquiry should be rejected. So let's explore this a little bit. What is blind? What is blind following? Anyone have an idea? Yes. What? Blind following? No, in this sense, blind following is being taken in a negative way. So let me give a story. There was once a veterinarian. He was an expert at caring for animals. And he had an apprentice who was learning the science, right? And so a farmer called. He had a problem with his donkey. The donkey had a big swelling in his neck, right? And so the veterinarian was called to come and see what is the solution to the problem. And so the expert veterinarian, is looking to see what is the solution. So he took a big hammer, and the apprentice is watching, very blindly watching, and the veterinarian smashed the donkey on the neck, and then that swelling went down, and the donkey went back to normal. So then the apprentice thought, well, that's easy, I can do that. So he went home to his village, and he hung out a shingle in front of his house, expert veterinarian. And all the farmers were bringing their animals to him. But what would happen is every time they would call him to heal their animals, he would smash them, and then the animals would die, right? So he went back to his teacher. He said, well, it looked so easy when you did it, but I tried it, and it didn't really work the same way. And so the teacher, the expert veterinarian, said, you fool, this is blindly following. That donkey had swallowed a watermelon. So it requires realization. It requires discretion to understand how to apply the teachings, the Vedic teachings, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada also. We have to learn discernment, realization. How do we get realization? Bhagavad-Gita 9th chapter, pratyaksha vagamam dharmam, right? We want that. We want that direct experience by realization. How do we get it? Well, in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada says, when one is chanting without offense, one can gain the experience of direct perception by realization. This is a key, right? So then, what about absurd inquiry? Anyone have an idea? What is absurd inquiry? Okay, I'll give you some examples. Dharmatma Prabhu told me I had to tell some stories of Prabhupada or no one would be satisfied, so here come the stories of Prabhupada. Okay, so Prabhupada said once, there are two ways to inquire. One way, to try to understand. The other way is to try not to understand. To try not to understand. So once Prabhupada was had a question. Someone, a guest in the audience was inquiring from Prabhupada. Well, this is supposed to be a self-realized person, right? So he thought up a really good, crafty question. He said to Prabhupada, "You're a self-realized person. So how many windows are in the Empire State Building?" He was trying not to understand, right? His point was to not surrender, to not understand. And so Prabhupada gave such a great answer to this. How many windows are in the Empire State Building? Prabhupada said, "How many drops of water are in a mirage?" Great answer, right? And then another time someone asked Prabhupada, and the point is, it has very much to do with the mood of the inquiry. Because sometimes Prabhupada would answer the same question many different ways, 2 different ways, depending on the mood in which the question was asked. So someone asked Prabhupada, "Are you seeing God?" Prabhupada would get this question a lot. "Are you seeing God?" And as a matter of fact, the person who asked this one instance, who asked the question, he was a very flamboyant, outrageous character dressed in sort of a purple velvet Merlin the Magician-looking costume, and standing there in a very verbose way asking Prabhupada, "Are you seeing God?" And Prabhupada said, "No, because you are standing in the way." But then another time Prabhupada was asked the same question, "Are you seeing God?" And in a very sincere method of inquiry, very sincerely, pariprashnena, right? So Prabhupada answered, he said, "Yes, and you are also seeing God every day. Don't you see the sunrise in the morning? Don't you see the moon at night? Haven't you tasted the taste of water? You are also seeing God." So, such a beautiful answer, right? So these stories, we love these stories. So I wanted to say, so that verse is about approaching a spiritual master. The next verse I think is also very, very important, because it says, after approaching the spiritual master, this is 4th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, verse number 35. After approaching such a self-realized person, you will understand the truth, and you will know what? You will know that all living beings are in me, and they are so beloved to me. So this is very, very important instruction. This brings us to also look at the compassion of Prahlad Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. So this brings up a very favorite story for me that I want to share with you. One devotee, very young devotee at New Vrindavan, he was guarding Prabhupada's house in the evening. Prabhupada's house was a little separate from where the temple was. And he was guarding from inside the garage because it was raining, and all of a sudden he felt a presence behind him, and he looked. Prabhupada had been upstairs translating on his dictaphone, and this devotee was listening. But then all of a sudden he felt a presence behind him, and he looked behind him, and it was Srila Prabhupada standing right there. So he immediately offered obeisances and said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, is there any service I can do for you?" And Prabhupada said, "You can go where I will not go." You can go where I will not go. And the devotee was so bewildered because he said, "But Prabhupada, you're going everywhere. You were just in Caracas, Venezuela, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, and now you're on your way to New York, London, Germany, Tokyo. Where is it that you won't go, Srila Prabhupada?" And Prabhupada said, "To the future. To the future. And by the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them." So this is a very, very important instruction for all of us. We're all trying to preach Krishna consciousness. How will we do that? We have to preach Krishna consciousness by caring so much for the people that they will know how much Krishna loves them, right? So it's a little bit late. I want to share one more beautiful story that I heard from Madhavananda Prabhu, who's sitting just to my right. So we were just at the Govardhan retreat. This is an advertisement for the Govardhan retreat. Please try to attend next year. You will be so happy and you will never regret it. So this is, for me, one of the great highlights of the Govardhan retreat, this beautiful story of Srila Prabhupada I heard from Madhavananda Prabhu. Get his magazine. It's going to be available in the next few days. Krishna Katamritam. Right? So here's the story. This story took place in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was giving his Nectar of Devotion lectures in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple in 1972. And Srila Prabhupada was talking about how this Shraddha, this faith, not blind faith, but real, true faith, has to be increased to the point of Vasudeva Ruchi, Vasudeva Kata Ruchi, till we have a true taste for Krishna, for Krishna's pastimes. And he said, and that is the beginning of our perfection, when we actually get a taste for Krishna's pastimes, for Krishna's topics about Krishna. And then he said something very extraordinary. Very extraordinary. He said, at the present moment, this is 1972, he said, at the present moment, looking at his disciples, he said, there is no ruchi, no taste. There are so many exalted persons, but they have no taste. They have lost all taste. The preachers could not preach properly to create taste in the people in general. It is not the fault of the people. It is the fault of the so-called preachers, because they could not create taste. They wanted to take the place of Krishna. That was their purpose. Imitation of Krishna. Imitation is bad. That will not do. You have to create taste, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. So this is also another I feel like these stories of Prabhupada are so dear to us, but these stories should also be a catalyst for change in our hearts. You can sit in a Bhagavatam class and hear one story, one word, one sentence that can just change the course of your whole life. So these stories of Prabhupada are meant for that purpose. So we cannot preach in imitation, not getting a taste for Krishna consciousness. But we have to truly get a taste if our preaching is going to be effective. Otherwise, we're just a false imitation, right? It's almost like we're putting up ourselves as an idol, like a false idol. I'm so empowered to preach. I'm so advanced. I'm such a senior devotee. Everyone should listen to me. It's like an idol worship, right? If we don't get true taste for Krishna. So I'll end with that. Thank you so much. And I think we have time for some questions. Yes, Prabhu.
You said the devotees named Kajak Savanam to have direct taste with Sri Krishna.
We need it. We have to also want it. Do you want it? You have to want it, right? What? Yeah, why we're here, right?
And so how can a person get that direct taste?
So I answered that question. Actually, Prabhupada answered that question in the purport to that verse. I heard from Vaisheshika Prabhu once that he'll read a purport of Srila Prabhupada's, the same one, over and over and over again, and then more and more comes out. He'll repetitively read the purport. So if you read that purport, Prabhupada gives the answer. That's the answer I quoted. If you want that, and you want it so much, and you want it more than loitering in the material world, more than loitering on the scenic route through the Vedic injunctions, if we want it, really want it, then the way to get it is by trying to come to the place of truly hearing and chanting attentively. And then Krishna gives that gift for someone who is chanting attentively. So even to chant in Namabhas, when that clearing stage, it's also my mind maybe isn't flying all over the universe. Namabhas, it's still a shadow, right? It's still a shadow, can't really satisfy us. We have to get the real substance. So we have to really chant in relationship, crying to Krishna, I am yours, you are mine, this is mamata. I want that. revelation. I want that direct experience of Krishna consciousness. Please reveal to me. Sachinandan Swami on the Govardhan retreat, toward the end, he said, pray to Giriraj to tell you, to reveal to you, what is your next step in your personal Krishna consciousness. So I think that's an excellent prayer. So trying to come to the point of chanting the pure holy name, and then Krishna will give it. It's not something that we can, jump up and attain like Ravana trying to build a stairway to the heavenly planets. It's a descending process, right? Shakespeare said, the quality of mercy is not strained. It falleth as the gentle rain from heaven. So we want that rain to fall on us. We have to cry for it, beg for it. And Krishna will give it when he sees how sincere we are. Oh, there's another story. Do you have enough time for another story? Okay. I'm asking the right person because he always wants more stories. So when we're sincere, Krishna will see we're sincere. So when I was a young devotee in Boston, Prabhupada, it seemed like all he was saying was, become sincere, just become sincere. And I said, but Srila Prabhupada, how do we become sincere? And he looked at me really seriously, and he said, how do you become a thief? And Varshan Prabhu told a similar story in Melbourne. Prabhupada answered the same question. He said, how do you become a drunkard? So what's the answer? How do you become a thief? How do you become a drunkard? Association. You hear from them, you associate, you eat like them, you talk like them, you walk like them, you find out their motives and their techniques, right? So we show Krishna our sincerity by our practice, right? And again, tomorrow again chant. And Krishna, okay, I offer my flower to Krishna, and Krishna did not appear today, but again I offer my flower. Again I offer the flower of my mantra. And again, and again, and again. This is sincerity. Is there time for one more question? Yes?
Hare
Krishna.
We see Prabhupada, how he gave mercy to everyone, how he gave the taste for everyone. You see, in the West, nobody was having taste, and he gave this taste. So we should always see how Prabhupada gave us everything. So if we follow Prabhupada and sincerely, just like you said, Prabhupada said, only sincerely. So if we are sincere, and Krishna is giving us everything, and Krishna, without asking Krishna, Krishna will give us everything. I feel that if we just follow straight, and automatically Krishna is giving us everything.
Yeah, so much can happen automatically by Krishna's mercy, but if we look at the example of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was crying and begging Krishna for his mercy. He was crying and begging at the home of Advaita Acharya in Shantipur. He was sitting there crying, crying, crying. And he was crying in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple. He was sweeping at night when no one would see and crying, Hey Rup, hey Sanatan, hey Gurudev, crying and begging. On the Jaladuta boat, his prayer is a cry, I have no knowledge, I have no devotion, but somehow you've brought me here. These people are all covered by nature's modes of ignorance and passion. How will they understand? Prabhupada brought his books on the boat, but he had no audience for those books. There was no one to read those books. He had to distribute the books, print the books, translate the books, print the books, distribute the books, but then he had to create an audience for those books. And he was crying and crying and crying, please make me dance, make me dance, make me dance as you like. So we can be a little blasé and expect, Kripa Siddhi, or we can endeavor very hard knowing that it doesn't come by our endeavor alone, but it comes by the grace combined with our sincere endeavor. Yes?
Thank you very much for this class. You were mentioning about blind following. You told this nice story about the veterinarian and his assistant. And you also mentioned that we could even blindly follow Srila Prabhupada. And that's a controversial subject. But I'd like to know if you could give some comments. How can we avoid that as a society? Sometimes there's different ideas what it means to follow Srila Prabhupada. How can we understand what it means to really follow him?
Yeah, in a society of so many people from so many cultures, There are different opinions, always different opinions. Everyone has a different idea what it means to follow Srila Prabhupada. But we should try to become essence seekers and try to go to the essence of what Srila Prabhupada gave. Prabhupada was, it's very interesting to me because I've been thinking about this a lot, and Srila Prabhupada was, he was teaching transcendent bhakti principles, and sometimes external things would be helpful, and sometimes they would not be. And he would accept or reject, and sometimes he would change. I'll tell you a story from Boston. We were in Boston, this was 1968, and hearing about the success of the devotees in London. They're chanting Hare Krishna in nightclubs, and all these people are becoming Krishna conscious. So we were in Boston, Satsvarupa, not Maharaj yet, Jadurani, me, a few others. So we started going to nightclubs and chanting Hare Krishna, and it wasn't really quite working the same, So Satsvarupa wrote to Prabhupada. He said, Prabhupada, I saw how much these devotees in London are pleasing you, and we tried to do the same thing, but it's just not working here. And Prabhupada said, I encourage them to do that because they're musicians. That's not for you to do. So these things take realization, they take discernment, and understanding according to time, place, and circumstance. And we have to really try to understand Prabhupada's mood and try to hear from those who are senior, try to hear from people who, in our best estimation, understood Prabhupada's mood and are taking it forward into the future. And how do they show that? By the way they treat the people. Find someone who is treating people so that they will know how much Krishna loves them, and ask that person your question. Because that's a person who understands the essence of what Prabhupada had to teach. We can get so tripped up in the weeds of so many, the extremes of the right, the extremes of the left. Both are extremes, We want to be essence seekers, Saragrahi Vaishnavas, Is that helpful? Thank you. I think we better stop or we'll be in trouble from the management. Hare Krishna, thank you all so much.